So this video is one of many on YouTube showcasing what you can do when you transfer the innards of a Lenovo ThinkCentre M93p tower, small form factor, into a larger tower case. What kind of graphics cards you can install and what kind of power supplies you can install, as well as other upgrades. So I'm going to open up the larger case and we'll take a look and I'll go over everything. This is not going to demonstrate how to do it, but I will talk about some of the cable adapters and some of the wiring that I did to try to make it work. I'll be shooting another video with some kind of cooler upgrade options, and that'll go over the whole ordeal of migrating from this case to this case. But this one's just to quickly show off because I don't have a lot of time before this one goes out. So let's take a look. Alright, let's open this thing up. Okay, so first off, this is a Cooler Master MasterBox Q300L budget desktop PC case. This is not tempered glass, this is just plastic. So keep that in mind if you're looking for something a little more high-end. This is more on the budget, within the budget realm, because I didn't want to spend a lot of money. It's still a pretty nice case, vanity-wise. It looks nice. These panels come off the magnetic. I don't mind it. However, it does sit there fairly loose, and if you do move it around, you do usually have to readjust, but I guess theoretically you won't have to really touch your PC case all that often. There's a magnetic one on top too. So I think that's all. I guess, well, maybe it'll catch some dust with the intake fan, but that's pretty much the only benefit I can think of. So onto the inside. I was lucky that this power supply allowed for a lot of decent cable management. It actually looks pretty clean inside. We have this whole empty area here. We could put another case fan in if we get a fan hub and wire that in, and that'd be really nice. Ideally, I would like to put LED fans into this thing, but we're going for about as budget as we can go for this setup. So I just used the stock Cooler Master exhaust fan, no LED, and pulled another stock Cooler Master fan as the intake. Let's get a better look at that. So I positioned the intake fan higher up in the case, just so we could get good airflow, just routing this way, like over top of the stock heatsink and CPU fan and directly out of the case. Now the only thing is that that doesn't provide a lot of cooling directly onto the GPU. It would be really nice to have one fan down here and perhaps one fan down here as well, just to provide the ultimate cooling experience. I think that would help a lot. So I'll go over the upgrades now, starting with the GPU. So what we have installed is one second, let me focus. Okay, what we have installed is a NVIDIA Quadro 4000 2GB DDR5 graphics card. It's definitely an upgrade compared to the integrated Intel HD 4600 graphics. It's not the best option you can go for, but on a budget, you'll still be able to play a lot of titles for gaming, and you'll be able to do a lot of things like video editing, photo editing, depending on your needs with ease. I don't mind it. It's a pretty nice little card. It's thin, it's sleek. The green chipboard here matches the motherboard, which is kind of nice, at least aesthetically speaking. So I did find that this GPU in particular, maybe it's just this one individual in particular, but it does run hot. I haven't had any overheating issues, no shutdowns or anything like that, so that's good. There is one fan here to help cool off, and the heatsink is pretty big because the GPU is pretty big too, about the size of my fingers there. I did take it off. I did take the heatsink off, and I put new thermal paste on. So hopefully that helps a little bit, cleaned off the fan from dust and debris as well. But ideally I would like to have more case fans, but you know, that'll become an option later on. So I kept the stock fan and heatsink for the CPU, and this has an Intel i5 4570 at I believe 3.1 or 3.2 gigahertz. It's not too bad. It'd be really nice to install an i7, but honestly, the i5 4570 is still a really good CPU in 2021, depending on what you want to do, of course, but we're talking budget here, so that's what you get. Solid option. And you can generally buy a small form factor M93p at a decent price, bare bones, if you can find it. So I installed 4 times 4 gigabyte DDR3, 1333 megahertz RAM to a total of 16 gigabytes. So it's a bit of a lower speed, but I think that's totally fine. I mean, for the type of expectations I have for a system like this, that not having a 1600 megahertz or higher RAM is not really the biggest deal. So onto the SSDs, I have one 128 gigabyte Samsung PM871 2.5 inch SATA 3 SSD as the boot drive, and also to run a few choice applications. Fits really nice in this case, actually. And down here, equally nice fitting, is a SanDisk SSD Plus. I forget the model number. I might post it right here in the video. But this is a 256 gigabyte SATA 3 2.5 inch SSD. And that's going to be the main boot drive for, not boot drive, it's going to be the main drive for storage and also to run games. And you do get some good speeds. So down here, you'll notice that I'll link to a good picture here, or I'll show a good picture right here that showcases the right configuration for the power button cable, the hard drive LED, etc. The pinout is actually really easy to assemble as long as you have a diagram. And you'll notice here I also installed the integrated speaker from the small form factor desktop, just because if anything, it's nice to have some kind of sound output option, and it's kind of cool to migrate as much as you can from the small case. So that's where it plugs in right here, the tiny speaker. You'll notice that green pin header there, the male end, that is for the front audio. So for your headphone jack, for your mic jack, as shown over here. Unfortunately, that's just not going to be an option on this build unless I pay for an adapter and install it, or I do a better job of rewiring the cable header assembly, which I did originally. I took all the wires out of the header that originally was installed in the small form factor ThinkCentre, and I routed it into the header that was in this, which I'll show you in a second. This header right here, so that is what came with this tower case, and I pulled all the pins out of it and put the pins into the header from the small form factor case, but I ended up having only audio in the right ear on the right side, and it also cut out all audio from the rear I/O options for some reason. I'm not too sure why. So I just said forget it. I'll troubleshoot this with another build. and I'll try out some cable adapters, and next time I might use something like these cables here to route and quickly troubleshoot and maybe install, instead of taking the time to route and rewire those headers. So anyways, that's not the end of the world. So on the front I/O, we have two USB 3.0. What I did was use a cable adapter that goes from USB 3.0 to the USB 2.0 header shown right here. And so we're not going to get those USB 3.0 speeds on the front I/O, but we are going to be able to use them. So that's good enough for me. Because, as you can see here on the rear I/O panel, we still have 4 USB 3.0 slots to utilize, so it's not the end of the world to not have USB 3.0 out front. And if it is, well, you can take the measures to get a cable adapter that will fit onto the proprietary slot on the motherboard, which I can also link to in the description below. Somebody went to the effort to make it, which is pretty cool, but I didn't bother buying one myself. However, I probably will in the future. I also installed a 24 to 14 pin adapter right here to fit in from the power supply to the motherboard. You will need that adapter, and I'll show a picture and link to that in the description as well. Let's see, over here, don't forget that your CPU power plug is 4 pins, not 6 pins. So if you do upgrade to a larger power supply, make sure you have that option, or you're going to have to buy an adapter. Alright, so here we have this Allied 500 watt power supply. I'm not too familiar with the brand Allied, but this came from a build that I either bought from somebody else or they traded in, and it works perfectly fine. It gives me more than enough cable options for modifications, so we'll go with that. So I believe that's it. Maybe I'll just make quick note that I did not utilize the SATA power cable options from the motherboard itself right here, as is prior installed in the small form factor desktop. I chose to use these SATA power connections from the power supply, mainly because I want majority of the power being routed from the power supply, and also vanity-wise, the cable is tucked in behind the case or behind the shroud, much nicer than they would look coming out from the motherboard and back around. So it's more aesthetically pleasing, I guess. So we'll just take a quick tour of the rear I/O, and usually I install a LED fan as the rear exhaust just to add some effect, but again, this is the more budget-friendly option of no LEDs. Not like there's a huge difference, you can get cheap LEDs. One thing I should note, well, no, that's fine. So here on the NVIDIA Quadro 4000 graphics card, we have 2 DisplayPort and 1 DVI option. And of course, on the rear I/O, we still have access to 2 USB 2.0, the RJ45 Ethernet port, mic and headphone and audio options here, the 4 USB 3.0, and for some reason, if you want to utilize it, the serial port. Of course, we won't be using the VGA or DisplayPort options on the rear I/O. So before we go through at least showcasing the results from the Heaven benchmark and at least one game before this whole assembly goes out, I should mention that you want to keep the thermal sensor connected to the motherboard, and there it is, that green pin header right there with the black cable. and I have it routed to sit on top of the front intake fan over here. I'll pull it out. Okay, there it is in my hand. You want to keep that, and I'm glad I pointed that out because I still have to tie that in, just so we don't have the fans blowing out of control, especially on the CPU. Without the thermal sensor, you'll run into the problem of having your fans running at top speed and your PC sounding more like you're standing beside an airplane than something nice and quiet and functional. So I have made that mistake before in the past, but luckily we do have that option, so don't forget to migrate that over as well, along with anything else you want to keep. So I think that is all. One thing I will also mention, now when you're looking at your motherboard, and people in the comments, if you actually watch this video, make sure you correct me if I'm wrong, but there is another fan header here, and you'll see it labeled as, what was that called? It's called aux1 fan. So anytime I have plugged a fan into that header, I've had it run at faster speeds than what's normal, and haven't had a lot of success. I personally would rather just use a fan hub, install a fan hub and connect it to the power supply via Molex or otherwise, or you could just do what I did, which I didn't mention. So for the intake fan, I have that connected via Molex here in the back. It's all tucked away, so I don't have to worry about connecting that to the motherboard at all, because the exhaust fan is already taking up the one available fan header besides the CPU fan. Alright, so let's put this thing back together, and if you have any other questions or you feel like I missed something, let me know. In my overzealous approach to shooting this video, I've totally forgot that I wanted to tie in the thermal sensor. And I'm just going to take this black tie strap and route it through one of the fan holes. And we'll have the sensor hang out right here. Okay, now we can put the plastic cover back on. So here we have the Heaven benchmark running on an average of 35, or we're getting an average of 25 to 40 frames per second, depending on how busy the screen is. You can see some lag and some screen tearing going on there. That's okay. This is still like this is kind of what I was expecting, I should say. The Heaven benchmark, I believe, is a really good foundation for 3D graphics and how well a heavier 3D game will run on your system. So in this case, we're looking at more of the lower end, lower graphics settings for something that's more intense. Okay, let's check out the one game I have downloaded off of Epic right now. Alright, so here we have the game called Dark, D-A-R-Q. I got this for free off the Epic Games Store. I've never played it before. This is the first time I've ever booted it up. It just seemed like it would be a good choice for this system to test its limitations. Let's try a new game. Am I sure? Yes. Okay. So I'm not too sure what the pace of this game is. I can see a small amount of lag, so I think I'm going to adjust the graphics settings. But I'm glad I chose this game because it looks like, while not a graphically intense game, it's very textured. There's a lot of detail. There's a lot going on in the foreground. There's a lot going on in the background. And I can see when I move, and I don't know if this is the game, how it's supposed to function. I see it's a little bit grainy. We're also using a somewhat standard older Dell monitor with a 60 hertz and refresh rate. That's my test monitor. So I'm going to adjust the graphics here. Okay, so have it set to medium right now, and prior to that, so let this focus. Great. So it was running on fantastic. I'm going to put it on good, leave everything else, and let's see how it runs. Alright, so that's way better. So I know recording this screen is going to look kind of really blue or really bright. Otherwise, this game is more kind of like gray and dark colors. So here we have dark running on good settings with everything else adjusted. So anyway, I have no idea what to do in this game, so I think I'm just going to exit out, or I'll spend some time playing this and report on it later on if anything weird does happen, but so far we're doing pretty good. Now let's check those temperatures on the GPU. Okay, using the handy CPU ID hardware monitor, I do see that the NVIDIA Quadro 4000 GPU temperatures did actually get up to 79 degrees Celsius. And that was only running the game for like 10-15 minutes. Now, I'm not too worried about that temperature. I would be worried about long term, perhaps. But just a fair warning, I suppose. And I'd be curious to know how this would operate for hours of use of gaming and general use. Otherwise, I think as long as this has the system has a chance to cool down once in a while, it's not really gonna be that bad. I do feel a little bit of heat coming out from the rear exhaust and the little tiny what would you call it? Like exhaust port, exhaust cutouts from the I/O of the graphics card. Yeah, so otherwise the CPU temperature is totally fine. The SSD temperature is totally fine as well. Everything is looking pretty good. It's just that GPU, I would be a little bit concerned about overheating just in the odd chance. But anyways, that is one example of migrating a ThinkCentre M93p small form factor desktop into a larger case like this one. So if you like this video, give me a thumbs up, maybe subscribe, and otherwise just leave a comment and give me some feedback, or if you did your own build, let me know about it. Otherwise, check out my other video, which I will hopefully be doing soon, where I'll actually demonstrate the entire build. Alright, thanks for watching. Hopefully you learned something. Have a nice day.